All right, welcome to the Christopher Yu podcast. This is a podcast about all things cultural, food, media, sports, video games, and the artistic struggle. Let's make the ordinary extraordinary. So come on in, just don't forget to take your shoes off. And today, everyone, we're back with another guest. I'm slamming my desk, so hopefully that comes through. This is actually the first guest that we've had that isn't in my immediate friend circle, first person that I haven't known for many, many years. So I'm super, super, super grateful that he's here. He is a filmmaker. He is a licensed first person view drone operator. He's worked for Stance, Vibrancy, Steezy, and he's filmed for many, many other prestigious groups and organizations. He's also released his own program called the Movement Media Mentorship. It's a personalized program for you movers, creators, and visual storytellers just like him. Ladies and gentlemen, Kai Go is in the house. Kai Go, let's go. All right.
Thank you very much. Oh yeah, that was a good intro. Good job. Damn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your
Thanks
Instagram bio is very good.
Nice. Okay. So yeah, man. Thank you for having me. It's an honor that this is the first time, and also a big step for you. So great job on finally stepping out of the friend zone and getting into the more uncomfortable zone. So, yeah, bro. It's good to be here.
Thank you. So, if you don't mind, maybe feel free to share. We'll just start things off. Little things about yourself, where you're from, how you got into being a filmmaker, things like that. Kai is also a wonderful break dancer, and we actually have some mutual friends in the breakdancing community, which is cool. Shout out Makoto Ikeda. So, so yeah, man. Let's. What's your little backstory on yourself?
All right, cool. So, I guess if we wanted to trace it back to where things started to actually start rolling, it would probably be, honestly, maybe around high school, college area. In high school, I really didn't have many goals, to be honest. I think I just was like having a lot of fun. I know that I wanted to do something more, and I knew that I wanted to do something for a living that I didn't hate. And besides that, it was not very specific. So for the most part, I was mostly just floating around. That's when I discovered, when I got transferred to a new high school, I discovered breaking. And I got lucky because we had a mutual friend. I knew one person at that school, and he introduced me to the B-Boy Club. And that was kind of how I started to really find a enjoyment in, growing, learning new moves, battling, dancing with people and friends. And then beyond all that, like continuing to hang out with people that had similar interests to me. That's not something I really, all that I never really got to experience before. So needless to say, I fell in love pretty quickly. And that kind of turned into me ending up getting accepted to one University of California. That was something that I didn't really plan on doing like heavily. Like, all I knew was like, okay, I should probably get into a college, and that would probably make my parents happy. So I'll do that, and we'll see where that goes. And so I give college a lot of crap now, because in hindsight, I'm like, damn, like, I guess I could see how, if you know what you want to do with your life, college isn't, and it doesn't require, like having a degree and getting a master's and a PhD and eventually going to like a residence and stuff like that. If there's other ways, there are other ways, and college is expensive, but either way, it was extremely useful to me because it allowed me to develop and discover what I liked. So when I got to college, I continued to break. I ended up getting into the breaking club, and I ended up doing an officer position for our club, UCS Break-In, for 4 years, eventually presiding in the last year. But just doing that, allowed me to grow a lot, putting myself in a position of leadership, or being given that position of leadership, I think definitely allowed me to mature and also discover myself. And on top of that, I don't think I would currently be a member of Stance Elements if it weren't for that. And for those who don't know, Stance is a ESPN type of deal. It's a media outlet for mostly breaking and dance, battling, and other types of movement. We're trying to expand, but if you're in the movement scene, at least in the battle scene, chances are you may have heard of Stance. If not, go check it out right now at Stance Elements on Instagram. And it allowed me, it opened up a lot of doors. And so pretty much that was kind of the start of things. And I'll just go through, I guess, the rest of the things I'm up to now and how that ended up being. You mentioned that I was a licensed FPV drone pilot. So that wasn't really something that was ever planned. In fact, that was something that only started to be a thing maybe about a year and a half ago. And that came about because of the pandemic. And because when that happened, wrench was thrown in all my plans. I was already working as a videographer and trying to get work. And like everybody else, all their shit got canceled. So now I'm stuck at home, feeling like I am worth nothing. And I am just going through Instagram and like YouTube and just looking through stuff. And I stumble upon a video from a guy named Johnny FPV. And this guy is one of the best FPV pilots in the world and continues to be one of the best FPV filmmakers, I'd rather say, where he does a really good job of flying his drone, but also capturing like amazing first person view dynamic footage that you might only see in like visual effects or anime until now. You know, it really brought these possibilities to life with a practical camera. And so I'm like, I need to try this. So over the last 2 years or year and a half, that was something I really dived deep into. And because it's still such a new thing and the barrier to entry is quite high because they only recently started selling a single FPV drone you can buy. But before that, the only option you had to create a legitimate one was to build one. So I had to learn how to assemble a drone, how to program it, how to solder. It was really interesting. And not to mention that I actually, one of my first picks going to college was becoming a mechanical engineering major, but I didn't get accepted because my math score sucked. So I didn't actually end up getting to do that. But now that I'm doing this, a lot of friends who did the engineering major, they're like, dude, you know, like we've been out of school and now I did engineering, you did film, but now you're like more of an engineer than I am. And I'm like, oh, great. Well, that I guess I got to live out my dream anyway. So yeah, I mean, it's been a lot of fun, and you know, just I'm really glad I decided to dive into that. And now, more recently, I've been picking up a good amount of traction, at least in the dance scene, because there's not a lot of dancers that also fly FPV drones. And a lot of people, anybody who is willing to take the chance and like experiment with it, such as Steezy and like Vibrancy, knowing people there who saw my stuff, they're like, wow, like let's try using you, you know, like they saw the work I put out and they were like, let's see something. And then recently I've been able to be fortunate enough to finally like start working alongside them and offer a very unique new perspective. So that is how that's been going. And then, like you said, Christopher, we can talk about this more later, but while I'm doing FPV, I also decided that I wanted to try to create a business. That's something I've been wanting to do for a very long time. It's something that I've been I guess I technically run one for my video creation business as a freelancer, but I wanted to create a product, something that could help multiple people that I don't have to necessarily be there in person to issue. And so recently, over these last few months, I've kind of put everything else on hold while I've been experimenting and digging and building this new mentorship program that is asynchronous, but teaches people, whether they be dancers, athletes, or artists, how to share their greatest movements. And what that means is giving them the tools as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, as a content creator to do anything that's, well, allows them to be an unapologetic creative, but also create at the quality that so many people strive for, but still can't attain because they don't have the tools. They didn't go to film school. They don't have the money for that. They don't have the time to go on YouTube and look up 1,000 tutorials, et cetera, et cetera. This is meant to solve that. And I like the way people are receiving it so far. Honestly, I would not be being honest if I knew 100% this was going to be something I personally wanted to go all in, or if people even needed or wanted. But thankfully, you know, we've been getting signups so far. We've been getting a handful at least. And I can see this being much more than just a one-time thing. I can see this really being a platform. So that's what I'm currently up to right now. Thank you for listening to my life story. And I hope you haven't left yet. I'll give the mic back to Christopher, where it's his show. So he should be asking you questions. So I'm going to allow you to. So thank you for the time on the air. And now,
yeah,
back to you.
Absolutely, man. So is there a specific moment where you remember, man, I want to be a filmmaker?
I guess you could allot that to probably, okay, I'll go back a little bit further than that because it wasn't Filmmaker at first. It wasn't really Filmmaker. The first thing I ever wanted to be was a I wanted to work in anime. I wanted to be an animator and or something, you know, whether it's anime or some sort of drawing, because I've been drawing as long as I could hold a pencil, apparently, according to what my parents tell me, because I don't remember that far back. But I do have a bunch of old drawings stashed up from when I was like 4, 5, 6 and onward. And I continued to draw pretty consistently between then and high school. And it wasn't until I was getting into college where I got accepted, right? I mentioned that I didn't get accepted as a mechanical engineer. I got accepted as a film major. So I was like, all right, well, if this is going to be my major, I better start doing some major homework. So that's when I started to really like pursue and like dive deeper into what entails what being a filmmaker or creating films entails. And thank God for YouTube. You know, I'm not going to say that it is not a reliable source, because there's tons of information on YouTube, but I spent so much time on it. And I also didn't start growing more rapidly until I finally started meeting people in the industry. But I had to put in that legwork at least to get my own experience, and it proved that I was like in this. And so I guess I would allot that, to answer your question, to around college time. And that's where the journey began.
Wow. Wow. What what were some of your biggest influences as a filmmaker? Because we live in this world, because for me, I was a theater major in school, and acting is kind of my like biggest passion in life. And then but when I was done with my program at Cal State Fullerton, I took some time off away from acting, and then I had like no desire to act, and I was like, I guess I don't want to act. But um, when the pandemic first started and there was lockdown and my girlfriend was here, we started watching like just a bunch of stuff. And I would talk to her about, I would kind of like do my best to break down like why this person's performance was ineffective and why this person performance was effective. And I found myself realizing like, oh, you know what, maybe I do like acting again, but we're still in a pandemic, so I've then have had to channel my creativity into other things, so hence here the podcast and Twitch and other stuff. But anyways, regardless, right, during my time at Fullerton, a lot of my professors, their influences were just other film and theater actors. But I feel like our generation, like millennials and on, more or less, we can draw influences thanks to the internet and blah blah blah. You know, our influences don't necessarily have to come from our field or from our interest, rather.
100%.
So I wanted to ask, you know, what were your influences and who inspires you, whether they're related to film and movement or not, or yeah.
Good one. I love this question because I think that is one of the strongest things that a creative can do for themselves
Mm.
is cross learning and pulling from other fields and figuring out how to synthesize those elements or lessons into their art. And I think I definitely relate to that, because even though it's still technically like a screen medium, like I mentioned earlier, I wanted to be an animator. I didn't end up becoming one. And not to say that I never will become one. So that card is still like not, I still haven't folded that card yet. But um, I decided to jump into film because it was, you know, it made the most sense at the time. And even though I did that, I continued to consume and watch anime, and I still do today. And even because I watched so much as a child, the dynamics and the emotions that those stories gave me are still like imprinted into my body. So anytime I create something or I film something, I often feel that emotion get called back when a situation occurs. And that definitely feeds into the final product of a work, whether it's an FPV shot or a dance film, you know, like no matter what, there is something, if you've ever watched any animation, you know, whether it be 3D animation or Japanese or American animation, there's obviously something there that real life film doesn't exactly capture, but you can take those feelings, emotions, dynamics, and like elements and then figure out how can I express that with the medium I have available to me. And regardless of what the outcome is, like it's definitely influenced by that. So that's definitely one huge one that continues to be a fuel to my work today. Trying to think of other things. I guess more recently throughout college, I've begun to approach things with more of a like a, for lack of a better word, business mindset. And when I say that is because once I left school, I did apply for a few jobs just to see what would happen. I got accepted to none. And I think that's for the better because to be honest, I have held one or two or three jobs since I was out of school. I worked at a Newbie Drone, which is like a drone startup company, and I love those guys. I worked at their place for a few months. But I also found out through those jobs that I don't, I definitely don't feel the same amount of fulfillment or agency, obviously, or anything for that matter, working and doing tasks for someone else than creating, even though creating your own thing requires arguably a lot more work. If you want to call it work, though, we'll get onto that topic later.
Oh.
And it requires a lot more efforts, I'll say, for that, as a better word. And it just feels so much better, especially when you experience both sides. I do think though that I'm grateful that I tried both because that allowed me to figure out and feel the differences. And now whenever I'm here, I can really pull that feeling like I don't want to go back there. And I'm super grateful that I'm here right now.
Yeah.
So even though like starting a business or trying to create a product or working for yourself and not really having other people to give you directions or give you tasks, which is honestly like so much less brain power when someone's like, do that. And you're like, you do that. Like, okay, cool. So I do both. I do enjoy both to an extent. Like I still work on sets and that's when people tell me what to do. And, I work at a lower level and I am given commands and then I fulfill those commands to the best of my creative ability. So not to say that being an employee or working under someone is not good. It's extremely valuable because every time I do that, I learn how to run my own thing. And so, yeah, I know I probably went on a tangent from what you asked because I don't even remember the question.
No, that was great.
I hope that the answer I gave you and whoever's listening, that information was helpful to some extent. So yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. What was it like for you just growing up? Like, were your parents supportive about you, transitioning into like a creative and arguably unstable sort of profession, or just like how was that like growing up with them?
That's a good question. I guess I didn't really. Well, yes. Okay, so for my mom, thankfully, she has always been one of my biggest supporters, always offering blind support. So that is extremely huge. I'm so like blessed to have that, to have a supporter like that. And I never really say that to her face a lot of the time because I guess that's like the Asian.
It's hard.
Parent relationship.
It's hard.
If you listen to this now, she knows, and she definitely knows. I show it in ways that aren't direct. My father, he worked as he worked at a company as a manager for a long time, and then when the recession hit, he got laid off, and after that, he ended up moving to Singapore. So ever since high school, my father has been there. But before that, and even now, like he's always been more of the more pragmatic one. So whenever I am doing art stuff or doing anything that doesn't seem to be the most realistic, then he will tend to try to usher me towards a more realistic path. So I think with that, I do love him and all, but as I do also think that it was valuable for me to actually not have as much of or for him to not actually be like as present as much, because I feel like that would have also been harder for me to grow creatively. But who knows? I can't tell because I'd only be able to tell if he was back here, like hypothetically. But either way, like I do miss him and stuff. But at the same time, he did give me a lot of valuable lessons in being realistic, because you need to be, especially if you're trying to create your own business. You're trying to grow finances and build something for your future kids and family, right? Unless you don't plan on doing that, then you might be able to just free ride. But there eventually comes a time in one's life, right, where your responsibilities grow and you are going to have to look out for people. So you might as well keep that realistic side in mind.
Right.
And like, you can't just be a baby in adult's clothing. Like you can be an adult, but still have like a kid's spirit, but also have the mind of a grown up, like a responsible grown up. So I'm trying to like really play with that balance a lot of the time, because as a creative, you don't want to shut yourself out too much. Right. So yeah, that's the balance. I'm sure everybody can relate to that who's of age and is in a creative field. Yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah. Where are your parents from originally?
All right. So my parents are from Singapore. They are
Oh,
both from
wow.
Singapore, and then my grandparents are from China.
Mm.
But my parents moved from Singapore to the States to go to school on a scholarship. They went to Oklahoma. Very random, I know. But they ended up moving here and having me. And so I've been here my whole life.
Yeah.
And I think that that keeps me quite. That definitely humbles me to in a big extent because I know that uh, I have, even though I have had the opportunity to travel a good amount,
Hmm.
um, I guess I'll bring up my girlfriend or my partner Pinar, who is based in Turkey right now. Who is
Mm.
actually you asked where I was going out of the country. It's going to
Mm.
Turkey to go see her. So it's been
Wow.
a year and a half since it's been like almost a year since I've seen her. I've never been to Turkey. So this will be interesting. But her backstory is she went all over. Like she grew up all over the world. She was born in China, moved to Turkey, moved back to China, was in America for a little bit, like back and forth, and very much like a kid who has a military family.
Hmm.
They moved a lot, and I feel like at least when I listen to her story and think about people like that who are like, dang, like they had like a very what's it called eventful experience growing up. It makes me wonder, like, dang, I feel very closeted because I've only been in this one
Mm.
spot. So I need to
Mm.
continue to keep my mind open, and it's just a humbling thought.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that I think that if you keep around you, like reminders that you're like, oh yeah, there's a lot more to this than you think and then that is definitely a huge help to continue growing for
Mm.
sure. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Wow. Going back to your parents real fast, they met in Singapore and then immigrated to the United States?
Yeah, that's right. So my parents met in Singapore while they were doing post like school. I think it's called like polytechnic or something like that in Singapore.
Yeah.
And my dad ended up coming to Oklahoma in referral to his older brother, and then my mom ended up getting a scholarship to go to that school.
Mm.
She wouldn't have been able to come if it weren't for that scholarship. So thankfully, she worked hard enough and was able to get that. And they both moved to the U.S. because of that. And they were around like 23, 28. So around the age I am now, 23, and they have been here pretty much ever since. Yeah, that's
Wow.
been that's been their story.
That's insane. Yeah, my mom, thanks for sharing, man. My mom is originally from Taiwan, came to the States
Mm,
when I think she was also 23.
mm,
And my stepdad, whose last name I have, he came to the States, I think when he was a little bit older than her, but he came first. He was
okay.
he was already here, but he's originally from China. The family moved to Hong Kong during like the
Oh,
Communist Revolution, and then
oh wow,
eventually he came here.
wow.
Yeah, their story is like crazy. Like
Yeah,
my dad's grandma was in like labor camps and stuff during like that time. And
jeez.
yeah,
Wow.
and then my grandma, my dad's mom, I'm gonna refer to my stepdad as my dad because he was the one that was around growing up.
Okay.
So if there's any confusion. And then my grandma would she would always like she got into this habit. She smoked well into her 80s and until she eventually passed away. But she I think she started smoking in her 20s. But she had this habit of always breaking her cigarettes in half and like rationing them. So
Wow.
then, like a pure gangster, she would smoke one with the filter and one without the
Wow.
filter, which I never recognized growing up. She passed away around the time when I was 9 or 10.
Okay.
So it'll be about 20 years next year. But yeah, so that's them. So my dad
That's
came
crazy.
1973 or 1975. He was in
Mm,
his late 20s. But yeah, I I think because we're born here and then we don't understand exactly what that experience is like to come to a new country and kind of start over. I think for me, what I feel like the closest way to feel like a sort of connection to that experience is to one start your own business, whatever that is, or if you're a creative, pursue that 100%, because I think there is this like parallel that they felt more or less, where you have to put in, like you said, the legwork, and then you have to start from the ground up. And I think for them, there's this, mentality that failure is just like not an option, because they've left everything to come here. There's like nothing to fall back on, and I think that feeling of failure is also strong in Asian cultures, uh, as well. So you have to like, you essentially would rather die than feel like a failure, or,
Mhm.
or it's practically the same thing, you know. And so I think that sort of grind and that like work ethic, I feel that I've never felt more connected to. Of course, I'm appreciative of their struggle, because it gave me and my siblings a place. We had, a decent life growing up, and we got by and things like that, right? So of course I feel appreciation for that. But until I started pursuing like this world of content, like I am now more recently, I've never felt, I think, this like deeper personal connection about what it is of like, I'm just gonna make this with my own two hands and my blood, my sweat, and my tears, and it's just gonna be something,
Mhm.
and I don't care how long it takes or what I have to do, but I'm just gonna fucking do it. And I don't think I've ever really felt that up until uh recently. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you feel that experience? Do you feel like, growing up child of immigrants, like like that experience has also affected you, just as like, maybe not even as a creative, but just overall, like as you, as Kai, who like moves around this world.
Yeah, definitely. So going back to the same thing I mentioned about how I lived here my whole life. One thing was I was fortunate enough to have family in other parts of the world.
Mm,
So going to Singapore was something that I started doing when I was like a younger boy, getting to travel back and see the rest of my family every 2 years or so. And so I really got to see another part of the country, um, and at least gave me a seed of an implant, showing me like, hey, like this is there's more to this world. Like this world is bigger than just where you live.
right.
And so I think if I never got to do that, then my initial worldview, my current worldview might be a little bit more constrained.
Mm,
So just getting to be like a part of a different culture, I'm definitely I'm happy about that for sure.
yeah.
I don't think I'd want it the other way around. I think I'm definitely glad to be able to experience it like that. And even for those who necessarily aren't like part of another culture and they're like native, then that is the strength of traveling the world. People like to say they love traveling, and I think one of the big reasons why it's great beneficially, like not even just as a trend or like a fad or as like an activity, but also because it really allows you, it opens your mind like internally, and nothing is going to replace that. Not seeing other people travel, like seeing pictures on Instagram, that nothing equates to actually being there.
Mm,
So that's something I highly implore people to do, especially now that things are slowly starting to open up
yeah.
and tickets are still, not as expensive as they normally are for the most part, unless you're going somewhere that has limited flights, then it will be. But try to, yeah, I mean, it's really worth it. So if you ever have the time, take like even if it's just a weekend,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I'd implore that for sure, because that's what I feel. Um, being a kid to immigrants definitely aided me with that
Yeah.
perspective.
How many times have you been to Singapore?
If it's every 2 years, then
Oh wow.
probably around like 10-ish times.
Dang.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. It's really nice. You should definitely
Yeah.
check it out if you haven't.
It's on my list, man.
Okay.
100%. The first time I went to Taiwan, I was like a freshman in high school, and I was
Mhm.
just kind of like shy, and I didn't want, especially like in that setting, like it did just feel very like foreign to me, and I
Mhm.
and my Mandarin is like absolutely horrible, because
I feel
like
that.
growing up, my dad doesn't speak Mandarin because he's from Hong Kong. So
It
when
speaks Kanto.
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
he speaks Cantonese. And I didn't realize this until I was much older. But when my dad met my mom, they spoke English to each other because she
Hmm.
can speak Mandarin, English, and Hakka, like her own like native
Uh,
dialect in Taiwan. And then she went because my mom's an overachiever. She learned Spanish at like this private women's language. She went to like a prestigious private women's college in Taiwan that
that's
was
boss.
recognized for language. Yeah, so she can speak. Yeah, anyways, but she couldn't speak fucking Cantonese, and he couldn't speak Mandarin, so they met learning English. And then, they got married. She came here. All of her family's in Taiwan. His family's here. My uncle, my aunt, my other uncle, my aunt's husband, my grandma, they were all here. They landed in Chinatown. And
Mm,
then my parents landed in Silver Lake, which is now full of hipsters and all that good stuff. But anyways, so she essentially had to learn Cantonese, otherwise she wouldn't be able to like communicate with, especially like her mother-in-law, my grandma.
mm,
So anyways, so growing up, uh, my parents spoke Cantonese with me and my siblings, but mostly English still. And then my mom would sometimes speak Mandarin with us. And then I didn't know there was a difference between Cantonese and Mandarin until I was like 6. I was at like a friend's house, and my buddy, his name is Brian. He was from Taiwan, came to the States young. We were already fairly young, but he came to the States like in first grade or something. So his Mandarin's flawless. He
mhm.
speaks Mandarin with his parents, blah, blah, blah. And then my mom says something to me in Cantonese, and he turns to me and he's like, "What did she say?" And I turn to him and I'm like, how do you not know?
Mm.
Like, you're from Taiwan. And then my mom told me, "Oh,
Seriously?
there's
Dang.
actually two different languages." I was probably like 6 or 7. I was young.
Oh, okay.
You know
Okay.
what I mean?
There's a
Yeah.
pretty distinct sound. So, okay, if you're 6 or 7, that's fine.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. Yeah. Hey, cut me some slack here, Kai. Cut me some
Yeah.
slack.
Yeah.
But
Got you. That's
you're
fine.
true. You're absolutely right. There is a different sound. So my girlfriend, who's of Japanese descent, she was born here. Her parents immigrated here. She's as I've introduced her to like Chinese culture and things like that, because that's what I grew up with. I've taught her to like identify when we're in like a Chinese market or something. We'll walk by, someone's talking, and I was like, "Hey, was that Mandarin or Cantonese?" And now she's getting pretty good at nailing it.
Nice.
So
That's good.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
awesome. Yeah. I feel that, man, because my girlfriend, or Pinar, because she was in so many different places,
Hmm.
she has this knack, especially because her dad had the same knack, to pick up languages quite fast. So
Wow.
she speaks like perfect English. That's why I couldn't tell where she was from when I first met her. So I'm like, "Are you a transfer student?" And she's like, "No, I'm like a regular student here." I'm like, "Oh, so then that means your Chinese is even better than your English, and you also speak Uyghur, which is like your
Oh,
native race,
yeah.
and then you also speak Turkish because you're there now, and you also speak Korean just because you like K dramas, and you also speak Japanese because you like anime." So I'm like, "Holy shit!" Okay, so yeah, I definitely I can see like it's pretty crazy, like people like that, like your mom and her. Um, they put me to shame for sure. I'm like, oh my god,
Yeah,
like
dude.
I can barely order a meal in Chinese. So like um we're extremely blessed that English it happens to be like one of the most commonly spoken languages too. So I'm like, okay, all
Yeah,
right, but still,
especially
I
in
definitely
Singapore.
yeah, dude, everyone speaks English in Singapore just with an accent, but still you can understand them and they can understand you. And exactly, like so lucky. And then I still feel like I have a due diligence to learn more languages. I
Hmm.
just haven't gotten to it. But immersion is definitely one of the best ways. When we go back to traveling, like, yeah, that's another huge reason why you would go, because that's why I studied abroad and I met Pinar there. So I never would have met her if I didn't study abroad. And my Mandarin got like exponentially better in those 3 months I was there. Like
Mm.
I learned more in those 3 months than I did in like 20 years of Chinese school. So yeah, that's to say the least.
Oh man, that's so
Another good,
awesome.
yeah.
The last time I was in Taiwan, I was like, I'm gonna speak as much freaking Mandarin as I can. And it took me a few days, but I mean, my Mandarin is still like elementary level, but I started being able to like think in Mandarin, because like I wanted to be able to like just say like
Wow.
how can I ask about this, and so yeah, it was really cool. And then of course I left, and then that muscle got really weak, but
I feel that, man.
I hear you, man. There's a special connection. It's also I'm also super fortunate because I look more like my biological father, who's from Afghanistan, so I look more like him than my mom. I have my mom's eyes, but my
Okay.
like I don't look like someone who's from
I see. I was trying to
Taiwan.
guess, yeah, what like mix you were. Okay.
Yeah. It's
Interesting.
it's always the
That's very
best
unique.
because people see my last name, but it's my stepdad's last name, so there's no like you blood
Mm,
in me, but
yeah.
I'm a you by
But
nurture, not by
you're
nature.
still half Taiwanese, right?
Exactly
Yeah.
on my
Mm.
mom's side. So when I bust out the Mandarin, people are like, "Whoa," because they see this like 6 foot,
This white Gora, and yeah, they're
white
like,
presuming, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and they're always like, "Wow,
哦，
that's
你的
really
中文
good."
太好了。
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly,
yeah. Wow.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's
good.
it's
Yeah.
it's really
Nice.
awesome. It always makes me feel
Yeah,
special, but
man.
I
That's
have
cool.
that
That's cool.
advantage.
Yeah. Thankfully, Asia, well, China, I guess, is one of those countries that they're especially for white, love foreigners, or like are
Yeah,
pretty like
man.
excited about them, at least excited, So
Yeah.
yeah, bro.
It's
Dope.
exciting. I get to really milk that for all it's worth. What are your favorite before we go back to like the more maybe serious conversations? I got
Sure.
to ask, man, as someone Singapore's on my list, what are your favorite things to eat when you're in Singapore that you just can't get here in
Oh
the
my God.
States?
Dude, there's too many.
That's
I'll
fine.
try to name three. Okay, so one is this one I'm thinking and craving right now. Um, even though I'm gonna break the can't make rule because we know our ways to get things,
Hmm.
you know, things you can't normally get that are super accessible in Singapore are, dude, if like it doesn't even compare, man. Like you go to a store here or a restaurant and they're like, "Would you like something to drink?" And I'm like, and I look at the menu and it's literally the same shit everywhere. It's literally fountain drinks, so like soda. I don't
Yeah.
drink soda. Like I rarely drink soda. And then like maybe if you're lucky, some sort of concentrated juice, and then water and tea. So I'm always like, I'll just have the tap water, please. Like, yeah, thanks. So that's pretty much it. And then you go to Singapore, you go to any hawker center,
Uh,
anywhere, right, that serves food,
uh,
and there's like 20 different drinks. Half of them are made from fresh fruits.
yes.
And then there's like Milo. There's like three different types of Milo. There's like Milo with ice cream, Milo dinosaur, which is like Milo with more Milo powder on top of it. And then there's so many different things. There's like grass jelly drinks. There's soy milk. There's bandung. That's the one I was going to tell you about. So if you never had bandung before, it is a mix of milk and rose syrup. And I think
Mm,
there's something else in it, but now that I'm saying that out loud, it sounds like sugar. And it is basically just sugar, but it's pink and it tastes really good. So you
wow.
should definitely try it. It's called bandung. It's this pink drink, and I freaking love it. It's the OG pink drink, not the Starbucks one. Even though that one's pretty good too. So I won't put that one. I won't throw shade at that one. But in general, like the drinks already blow like most places out of the water here, and then the food, chicken rice, Hainanese
Oh,
chicken rice is a staple
oh,
in Singapore. Yeah, you sound like you're familiar with it.
bro.
Yeah, so there's stuff like that. I mean, dude, it's the same with Taiwan. Taiwan's got so much good food.
Oh man,
Yeah,
don't even get me
to be
started.
honest, yeah, I think I don't know what happened with our culinary history, but it seems like people just really liked hamburgers and hot dogs. Like I went to like a really high class American restaurant, like literally for lunch, with Nico actually,
Oh,
and
sick. Uh-huh.
yeah, and uh, it was a high class American restaurant, and I had a hot dog wrapped in a pancake. That's literally what I had. I could show you the leftovers. That was what I ended up getting because everything else was pretty much pancakes or bacon or something. And
Yeah,
I was like, all right, this is fine. But you can only have this so many times. But
right.
in Asia, there's just so much variety. People are so creative with their food.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. So yeah, good question.
I think when it comes to American cuisine, I feel like it's kind of hard on the West Coast, but I feel like aside from like the South and maybe like parts of like the East Coast, it's hard to find like American cuisine that isn't the kind of like generic what people think of. Of course, I'm someone who was born and raised in Southern California in the San Gabriel Valley, which is
Mhm.
the highest concentration of like specifically Chinese, but also just Asian immigrants outside of China and Asia, so I had access to a bunch of great Asian food,
Mm-hmm.
and my dad is incredibly picky eater, so he would only eat like Cantonese, Southern Chinese type of cuisine. So my mom could never make anything like Taiwanese either, so we had to go.
What?
Yeah, yeah, man, let me tell you. Which, I mean, that food is still good, but like, you eat anything enough, you don't have a say because you're like a kid, you know what I mean? Eventually you're like, I'm bored of this stuff. And also
Yeah.
just like Chinese food, Asian food is very like laborious. And so my mom,
Mhm.
had to like cook all these things.
Damn.
Anyways, so but yeah, I feel I feel like it's hard to find what like great American food is on the West Coast. But then again, I feel like great American food isn't easy to define, because if you find something, you can trace other, cultures and things like that, back into it. Like even Southern food, a lot of it is food that's influenced from, countries in Africa, because it's things that slaves ate to remind them of home, and then it, became part of the culture. And then if you look at like the East Coast, things are influenced from, Germany and Italy and things like that, so it's hard. So unless you say like the true American food is like Native American food, but then there's like hundreds and thousands of different types of tribes, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
really hard. You're right. It is unfortunate that what we're known for is this like fast food, but really there's like a whole, there's a whole spectrum of what American food is, because there's a whole spectrum of you know, what type of people live in this country.
Mm.
And I feel that this is also part of our responsibility as kids of immigrants who came here and kind of like, you know, young folk growing up and kind of taking the reins of this world, is that we have to really make our voice known in what we want this country to represent. Not getting like political for the sake of getting political, but I think, our parents came to this country for opportunity, and so we were given opportunities like a gift, right? We have to decide what we're gonna do with it, and I feel like part of seeing what's going on in the country and in the world, we have to do our part in showing people what America, really can be. It's not
True.
just a place where it's full of, you know, black or white and violence and guns and just kind of like those like hot button issues, but it's actually a place where diversity can really thrive, where ideally people of all colors and religions and identities should be able to exist. So anyways, that's my tangent for food and nationality, because I feel like food is that bridge. It's something like Eddie Huang has talked about before, and other great like culinary influences, that food is that bridge, and then what I also found fascinating, before we move on to the next thing, is that when people want to attack a culture or a group of people and like belittle them, they'll always attack their food, because that's what makes them less human, So if people are hating on, let's say like Chinese people, right? Then they'll say things like, oh, Chinese food is cheap, or there's like they eat cats and dogs, or there's like MSG, right? So we can see
Exactly. Yeah.
culturally, right? If you attack the food, that's like the biggest way to belittle a culture. So I think
Hmm.
the more we can talk about food and the power of food and our also experience with food, especially as immigrants, I think the easier we can change that dynamic. But anyways, that's my TED talk
That's
for
funny. Yeah. I,
food.
I I never really thought about it like that, but it does make sense. Yeah. If you like target their food. It's funny because I usually only have good things to say about other people's food, except
Yeah.
for America's. So so I mean, I guess it's not racist if it's yourself, right? I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah.
we can continue on to the next topic.
Yeah, for sure. I will say this: being judgmental is like one thing, right? And being critical is another. I think it's okay for us to be critical of the food that we find here, because of course we want it to be like better. But if we're defeatist and being like, oh, this shit ain't never gonna be better, then
Yeah,
it
I
just
feel you.
it just simply won't, right?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's okay. Kai, you fucking make your voice be known, man. The hot dog and the pancake, if it ain't great, it ain't great.
It was good. So I'm not gonna say it wasn't good.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. I just think it was funny.
Yeah.
I'm not actually, no, I'm not gonna say it because I don't know if it's podcast appropriate. So we made a very phallic joke about a hot dog and a pancake. You can probably use your imagination and think what it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. If no one understands what that is, well, anyways, I don't see how that would be possible knowing me. So as we're kind of rounding third base of this podcast, want to ask, you have this amazing project that's out. This episode we're recording currently on the 25th. This will be out Tuesday the 29th, just for your reference for things we're talking about. But you have this program that's out, the Movement Media Mentorship, to kind of address. It seems like it's the perfect solution for the Kai that was in college, who was studying about filmmaking and all that stuff. So I'd love to hear about that, and also just any other goals or things you're working on for the rest of this year.
All right, that's good. I mean, you put it in a good way, because essentially this was something that was birthed out of a problem I wish I had a solution to, And so now that I'm here, at least at the point I'm at, I can now look back at other people who have been, I guess, inquiring and like messaging me and talking to me when they get the chance, whenever I'm on set or filming dance videos for teams or for individuals or groups. They often ask, like questions about this production process. And so what I've been trying to do a little bit more, well, at least since those questions have been arising more and more within myself and others, I finally, after reading books on business and also just kind of figuring out, how to build something and make it, as effective, but also as scalable as possible. Like what exactly do I have to offer? And so after kind of like rummaging through different things, I even considered making an FPV course before, which I mean, I still like on the books, but I think I want to gather a little bit more experience before I do that. I was like, what have I been doing? And it was like, it hit me like a slap in the face. I'm like, wait, I've been doing this for like 7-8 years. And even though I feel like I'm still growing, I'm by no means like the best. I still have, they say it like this. If it's a spectrum from 0 to a 10, you don't have to be a 10 to teach something. You just have to be higher than a 0, right? You just need to be a little bit higher than the person that's learning from you. You don't need to know everything. You just need to know more than the people you're teaching. So at this point, I probably consider myself maybe like a 5, if not a 10. I definitely like, I mean, that's being humble, but still, like if you look at like someone like Keone Madrid or Mari, like his partner, I've definitely had the like blessing to be able to work with them, but just like at the level they're at artistically in dance and now film, that's definitely like a 10 for sure. Or like at least they might not consider themselves a 10. There's probably something higher than that, but like that's where I aspire to be more like, like within that magnitude of creativity and storytelling and influence. So anyway, in the time being, there's no reason why I shouldn't start now, because things take time to establish. So I was like, you know what? Yeah, screw it. I've been waiting way too long. And I think that this is a perfect opportunity to try some things out, teach some skills and see, also address a need that I've been seeing personally, like I guess on Instagram and just on social media. And when people try to create their own videos or art, a lot of dancers are freaking talented people. Like, they, and the thing about dance, which makes it so beautiful because it's so impermanent, is, once you do it, then it's done. Right. I mean, I guess that's kind of how it is with most live art, but especially for like dance performances. So the solution to that is capturing it, right? Is recording it or filming it. And so that's what a lot of people try to do. And we're blessed and also cursed to live in an age where media is so accessible now, and it's easy to create and post, and we get lost in it. And a lot of the stuff that I see, I'm like, damn, dude, like I can't even see what you're doing. Like you're talented, like you're freaking amazing breaker or like dancer or something, but just because you don't understand how to record it or like share your story online,
it's lost.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm like, okay, I could definitely help some people out with this. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna create something that, like, a platform that can hopefully supplement this need.
Mm.
So that's kind of what the mission of Movement Media Mentorship is first we're starting with dancers, since that's my bread and butter, but it's movement, because movement is more than just dance, it's martial arts, it's sports, it's anything, like, it's action, right? So there leaves a lot of room for pushing. I just wanted to make it specific enough, since there's plenty of people who can teach you filmmaking, like, in a general sense.
Right.
There's school for that. You can go on YouTube. I'm like, okay, I want to make something that's tailored for my tribe. So let's do this. Let's create this. And now, over the last few months, it's just been a matter of research, talking to people, like interviewing them and asking them questions about what is your experience with creating videos been? Like, what problems have you encountered in the past, and how did you solve those problems? If the problem wasn't actually solvable, or it's more serious than we thought, then it's like, okay, you know what? That validates that this course should be a thing. So it's been a huge exercise in not only instruction, but also, like, creating products. So it's just been very multifaceted in a lot of ways. I could talk for a long time about all that, but to give the listeners, just a rundown of it, I explained it earlier in the show, but once again, it's the tagline for it is to share your greatest movement. And so that's what our mission is. We want to help dancers, artists, and athletes share their greatest movement. And when you say movement, it's not just like your dance, but it's also like your culture, your story. So there's a lot of things here that I think, if dancers or any other people online who have talents already, or are looking to even become a filmmaker, even if they have no talent, but they want to become a filmmaker, but they're in the dance space, this is like the solution for them. And it will help you save years, because that's essentially the idea. If I'm trying to make something that, hopefully, if it existed, then I wouldn't have needed to go to film school for necessarily. I'm trying to jumpstart people's creative careers with this. So that's the mission. So if you want to save years of your time, instead of going through, like, I mean, film school can be helpful. Mine, my actual curriculum, this is not my fault. I mean, this is my fault. This is not their fault. Is my curriculum that I went to for school, it was mostly theory. And you'll find that in a lot of other schools, it's the same principle, where you just learn about writing about films and you don't actually learn how to make films. So this is everything I ever wanted to learn, and more. The experience I've gotten from working actually in the field alongside the people that I've looked up to all this time, Steezy, Vibrancy, who make all the Kinja stuff and more, Stance. So the people I've been working with for this long, and then Keone and Mari, of course, and beyond, like, taking the lessons I've learned from them, being there for their processes and helping out. And now it's like, okay, so this is how they make their art so good. And now here's how you can make yours.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully we can make the world of movement a more beautiful place with this platform.
That's amazing, man. I really hope it really empowers the creators to grow. So that way this movement, because I feel like the movement community is so niche. It's really hard for other people to, like, stumble across it. And I think part of it is what you shared. It's hard to translate what's going on onto film and on video, because it's so niche. Because as movers ourselves, way back in the day in high school, I used to dance, and then I started a little bit again in college. But anyways, there's a little part of my life that's, like, really invested in learning about the movement culture and, like, hip hop dance and breaking and all that good stuff. But anyways, it translates for us because we know what that's like. You know what I mean? Because we see someone do something and experience something, and we already speak that language. Like, it doesn't need to be translated. We already understand the essence and the power of that movement, because we know ourselves and our body, if we try to do that, or when we've seen something like that live, we already have that effect within us.
The language. Right.
Exactly. And it just, like, ripples, because it's familiar. But if you don't have that, that's the issue. It doesn't translate. So I hope this changes that, man, because that's so incredible. And I think that's the power of dance and also theater is that there's this intimacy that happens because if you're not catching it live, it's gone. That moment's like gone forever, you know? So if there's a way to, you know, record that and present it in a way that as closely as possible creates that feeling of being there in person. I mean, damn, that would just be so amazing because I think about how many things we might have seen that no one else will get to see, or like how many times I remember like when I was like showing my girlfriend like all of these like really great dance videos. I showed her like um a performance by Expression Crew, their like marionette performance that I watched back, dude, I don't even know, like 13 years ago or something. And like the whole time, thankfully they had at least multiple angles on stage, but one of the angles was just probably someone standing with a camera at the back of the auditorium just like
Mhm.
recording it, you know. And like, man, how cool would it be if that can live on in a way that people can really feel
Exactly.
what's going on. So that's
Yeah.
exciting, man. Congratulations on that. That's really
Thank you.
wonderful.
I appreciate it. I want to add on to that actually, because that's a very good point you brought up, that dance is a language. And people can only really appreciate it the more versed they are in that language.
Mm.
And that is often what stops us from reaching other people. And so a lot of dancers who reach other audiences and such like that, um, it's really about cracking that code. And so one of the ways to crack that code, and as I learn more, I will continue to teach them. But one of the strongest ways is storytelling, right? And this goes into why I think Kyoni Mari, once again, referring to them, are so good and so well known, and are able to touch mediums outside of just dance, is because
Mm-hmm.
they're cognizant of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not sure if you're familiar with like the Pixar, or I'm sorry, the Disney short they just released recently. It's like the pre-roll. You know how like every Disney movie has a 4-minute short before it?
Yeah.
So recently, the one for Raya and the Last Dragon is called Us Again. And Us Again is choreographed by Kyoni Amari. And it's a dance short.
Oh,
It's a dance short. And so
wow.
just to see that, if you watch that 4-minute short on Disney Plus called Us Again, it's dance centric, but no matter who you are, you don't have to be a dancer to appreciate it.
That's right.
And if you watch it, it's because there's a story, there's a narrative, and the dance is complementing the narrative. So
Mm.
it's really that's one of the ways you can turn dance into like an overarching thing. And you can tell stories with dance, Stories overall, like stories are kind of like a subtext. So no matter what medium you're doing, you can always tell a story. It's really interesting. And because of that, it's hard to learn, but there are techniques to it. And those are techniques I've learned. And now I want to teach to dancers and movement artists. Because if you can learn how to tell these stories, then they have been proven throughout since the beginning of time, since people were drawing on walls,
Mm-hmm.
as the most effective way to communicate ideas and lessons, right? Because the old lessons, like myths and folk tales and stuff, all of those were lessons for kids to not do stupid shit.
Mhm.
Like don't trust strangers or you're gonna get eaten by a wolf.
Right.
Things like that. Yeah. So don't let people into your house or else they're gonna freaking like kill you. So
Yeah.
don't wander into a stranger's house or they'll bake you into a cookie. So
Right. Right.
yeah, it's stories have always been a means, because humans, the way we're just wired to want to keep hearing them. And then we're also wired to remember them because it's in a sequence. And so if you can learn how to tell a story properly, then so many things get unlocked, not just as a dancer, but just as a communicator, as someone with an idea. Yeah, it's really powerful stuff. So that's recently what I've been trying to learn more and more about now and teach it as well.
Mm. That's amazing, man. So as we kind of approach the end, when you're not doing all of these things, man, what do you do for fun when you have some free time, like things you like watching, reading, video games, or anything like that, man? Like what does Kai do for fun?
Nice. Okay, good question. So when I think about that, and I answer, and the answer I would give you is gonna sound weird, because it's like, oh my god, like he literally doesn't stop. Because everything I do, I feel relates back to what I want to do, like career wise. But
Absolutely. Absolutely.
remember what I said about it's always working, but maybe it doesn't feel like work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the key, is how do you find something that you can do that technically other people might see as work, but you
Mm-hmm.
don't see it as work.
Mm-hmm.
It's related to your craft, but you enjoy doing it to an extent, right? And so I guess to give you some answers, actual answers, for fun, I would go out and fly drones, like with friends. I would go read manga or go watch anime, which is still related. I'd read a book sometimes, which is like trying to analyze. Sometimes just for fun, just get lost.
Mm.
But then also in the back of my head, I'm like also trying to remember how the story structure is. So I've kind of passively and actively, unintentionally and intentionally, I've been trying to position myself as much as I can, no matter where I am, so that it contributes to what I want to do overall. And I am, well, very fortunate because, of course, I have to be like very grateful for that, and I'm blessed to be able to say that. But that's like what I've been working towards. So it all started with, you know, finding something interesting and then pursuing it. And then after that, you get a little bit more tactical and strategic and be like, okay, what can I do to improve this? And I think the biggest blessing is that I'm pursuing something in a creative field, which, as long as you are careful about it and you protect your enthusiasm, is going to be a blessing, So that's what I would say is what I do for fun is a lot of things I do for quote unquote work.
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Because, like you said, it all feeds into it,
Mm.
And I think that when people recognize that, it allows us to appreciate the little things, as like hallmark and stereotypical as that sounds. But the more we can appreciate, every little aspect of our life, the things we do, and how that fuels whatever it is that we're doing, whether we want to call it some sort of creativity or whether it's a job or whatever our mission or our passion, even if it's athletics, things like that, it all comes in. So I think having that awareness to know, even if I do something that is directly related or indirectly related, it all helps. It's all part of it. It's all just different shades that contributes to it. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yep.
That's wonderful, man. So, how can people, I'm sure they're listening to this and they're like, man, this guy sounds amazing. How can I follow him? What are your socials? What are all of your things that people can look into?
All right. So get ready. This first one's from MySpace. No, I'm just kidding. I never got to have MySpace. But I guess the first thing I would point you to is my personal Instagram is at Kai Vertigo with an H at the end. Since my last name is Go, Goh, Kai Vertigo. And same as my TikTok, which I haven't been posting on a lot. TikTok is interesting. It's so interesting.
Yeah, it's
In a good way, question mark. But anyway, if you want to check it out, you can. And most recently, follow at Movement Media Mentor on Instagram. And if you're interested in looking at the program or learning more about it, check out movementmediamentor.com.
awesome. And I'll be sure to include all of those ats in the podcast episode description and all that good stuff.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Again, no, honestly, man, I really appreciate you just being down to talk and join and officially meet. I feel like we're like officially friends now. So this will be great.
Man, I always appreciated your support even before this. So yeah, I mean, I get it though. I think nothing really beats finally getting to talk. So
right. Exactly.
I've had a good time. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone. This wraps up another episode of the Chris For You podcast. You can listen to this on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If you want to check out my other things, you can also look up my Instagram at ChristopherJU, my YouTube at ChristopherJU, and on Twitch under Twin Turbro, TwinTurbro. I've been streaming a lot of Apex, which is also what you'll find on YouTube. And if you want to watch this podcast episode, just straight up watch our video recording instead of just listen to it. You can also check that on my YouTube as well, which is again at ChristopherJU. And you also find highlights from my Twitch stream if you're into that sort of thing. But other than that, thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode. Thanks again for all of your support. And please take care of yourselves. And if you can, someone else as well. That's it. Thanks everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.